"She came in here," said the growling, unfamiliar voice of someone who did not belong in the house. "Are you certain?" replied the cold voice of someone else who did not belong in the parlor. "In the middle of the night. There's feathers all over the floor. Lots of things got feathers." The intruders moved farther into the parlor, their voices growing too faint to hear. Honorine slunk across the foyer until she was tucked behind a tall potted lemon tree standing just outside the parlor. From around the carved terracotta pot, she could see a pair of men standing on the singed rug just in front of the hearth. "Feathers like this, Bloom?" said the growling one, holding up an iridescent black feather exactly like the one that had crumbled to ash in Honorine's hand. He was a huge bulldog of a man with a boxer's face and knotty shoulders bulging under his snug blue coat. His face was burned and bleached, with the red skin and white hair of a fair man who spent too much time in the sun. The bridge of his nose was smashed nearly flat, leaving a little lumpy knob with round flaring nostrils over his iron jaw. On his shoulder rested the long barrel of a rifle made from what appeared to be copper, painted wood and glass. "You're right, Sultan," said the one with the cold voice. "That's definitely her." He was pinched, shorter and much leaner, with mismatched eyes and hair in wild tangles. His face was deeply tanned, and his teeth clinched with cold when he spoke. He wore the same style of long blue coat, tall cuffs on his high black boots, and jewelry fashioned from bones. He held a lantern like nothing Henry had ever seen before, a shot of glass and iron orb atop a short copper baton, which he could point in any direction to aim the illumination. He also appeared to be carrying two guns and a variety of knives. They were sailors, Honorine realized, though this did not provide any further information as to what they were doing in Lady Vidalia's house in the dark of the morning. Nosing about in the fireplace, then a third figure entered the room through the servants' entrance. She was dressed like the others in breeches and tall boots, with a billowing shirt and a knee-length blue coat, though hers was adorned with few extra bits of brass and braiding. She was rather tall, nearly the height of the Sultan fellow, with a serious face and a tremendous amount of thick black hair swept back into a sturdy but messy knot on the top of her head. She wore spectacles with thin yellow lenses and silk gloves over her hands, which she used to examine the room, occasionally running a finger along the surface and inspecting the tip of the glove. "Professor Dussel," Sultan said with a nod to the woman. "Gentlemen," she replied, without looking at either of them, "have you found anything useful?" "Australia was here," Bloom explained. He held up a clutch of feathers, which were already curling into embers and ash. "But you've touched them, so now there's nothing left to study," said the professor with a sigh of annoyance. "There are prints on the carpet," Sultan added, waving a meaty fingers towards the foyer, where Honorine crouched behind the lemon tree. "Wolf, I suspect." "Yes, too small to be the lion," Professor Dussel observed. Wolf and lion, Honorine thought, looking quickly over her shoulder. The foyer was, for the moment, dark and still. And what about the book? Professor Dussel continued. Honorine felt a cold prickle around her collar. They must be talking about the one she had pulled from the ashes, and was now resting in her pocket beside the odd mechanical bee. Not here, Sultan replied. Not in this room anyway, Bloom added. Then we keep looking, said Professor Dussel. The map maker wouldn't come all this way to find a book and then leave without it. Honorine's throat prickle turned to a flash of goosebumps at the mention of the map maker. He was someone or something that even brave Lord Vidalia considered too dangerous to discuss in his own private journal. The three of them turned away from the fireplace, heading towards the foyer. Honorine huddled into a ball and pressed herself against the wall. What if he already has it? Bloom asked. They wouldn't still be on the ground if they already had it, Dussel replied. Just that, just when she was sure they were going to discover her, Honorine looked up to see a girl standing on the staircase landing. She was no older than Honorine and dressed in a short, slivery tunic and leggings that seemed to be woven from white silver ribbons. She had dark skin and a wild mane of glossy black hair falling past her knees, all illuminated by a faint outline of soft violet light. The girl held up a finger to her lips, gesturing for Honorine to stay silent, then pointed very slowly to the sitting room across the foyer from the east parlor. Honorine turned to see something huge, white, and glowing with blue light moving silently among the silk upholsters, couches, and tall potted ferns. There's one of them, Sultan said, raising his rifle as he and Bloom ran for the sitting room, no longer bothering with quiet footsteps. Put down your weapon, Professor Dussel commanded, marching after them. They didn't appear to heed her instructions. As their boots clattered across the marble and the trio headed into the sitting room, Honorine heard a sharp, faint voice call to her. Hurry, it insisted, as if right in her ear though. When she looked up, the girl was making her way silently down the staircase, gesturing for Honorine to come toward her. Between the thieves with guns and the little girl in the silver tunic, Honorine opted to follow the girl. She padded across the foyer as fast as she dared as the sailors stormed through the sitting room. Outside, the girl whispered, pointed to an open door leading onto the patio overlooking the gardens. Go fast before they find you. She heard the crack of gunfire, then an angry bark. I gave you an order. This was followed by, You're not in command of this expedition, and then further muffled arguing. Run, said the girl faintly. Honorine ran. Her feet pounded down the carpeted hallway, slapping so hard when she reached a bit of wood floor that her heels stung as she stepped over the threshold of the terrace doors. And into the night a girl slipped out after her, pulling the door shut very quietly. Who are you? Honorine asked, panting and looking back over her shoulder at the dark house. Strange lights flashed through the windows. Who are they? And what are they doing in Lady Vidalia's house? I am Astrea, said the girl. Her eyes sparkled very dark green. There was something both familiar and uncomfortable about her stare, as if she was seeing more when she looked at Honorine than Honorine saw when she looked back. and they are dangerous henchmen, though not as dangerous as the men they work for. They, there were many more of them, and you must come now before they find you. Wait, Honorine panted, suddenly aware she was standing out in the yard in the dark with a complete stranger who, though she looked harmless enough, was no more supposed to be in the Vidalia's house in the middle of the night than Sultan or Bloom or Professor Dussel. How do I know you're not dangerous too? Oh, I'm very dangerous, Estrella said, but only to them. Honorine looked back to see Sultan and Bloom lurching toward the, the terrace door. Aren't you supposed to say something comforting, like there's nothing to be afraid of? I could, but that would be a lie, Estrella replied. Sultan burst through the doors, his rifle cocked and aimed. Get to the greenhouse, Estrella said, though Honorine wasn't certain she had said anything aloud. Then Estrella sprinted to the terrace railing, hopped onto the stone banister with one graceful step, and leaped off. Something rose up behind her as if she had caught part of the night and was pulling it around her. Wings, Honorine gasped. What she had mistaken for long glossy black hair was actually a pair of wings. The feathers shimmered violet and green in the pale starlight. Sultan took a terrible shot which exploded in a ball of hot, sulphurous green smoke. While the men were choking and wiping their watering eyes, Honorine tumbled over the railing and jumped onto the lower level of the terrace a few feet below. Her heart pounded and she could feel her pulse racing through her ears. She would have expected to be terrified, having just been chased from her house by men with rifles. But there was something more than fear racing through her veins. There was excitement, like a shock of ice water. After all, she had just seen a girl with wings. She ran down the cascading veranda steps and onto the damp green lawn, where she was quickly surrounded by mist and shadows. In the darkness, the yard looked much bigger than it did from inside the house. Lantern casings filled with yet more almond stones, instead of oil and wicks, hung on tall poles along the garden paths, swaying lightly in rustling breeze. The stones glowed here too, casting diffuse yellowish green light over mounds of manicured shrubbery, making them appear to swell and ebb like the bellies of great slumbering beasts. From the safety of the garden path, Honorine dared to look back at the house. Estrella had vanished. Sultan and Bloom were running along the terrace towards the garden steps. Professor Dussel was nowhere to be seen. Honorine turned away from them and snapped down the path towards the tall, sturdy brick garden wall and the tiny greenhouse stuck up under a lilac hedge, hidden from view of the main house. There was a soft flash of light from within the greenhouse itself as she approached, and a gust of wind rattled the glass in its lead frames. Radicchio, she called out meekly, as loud as she dared, though she knew that whoever was inside was not the gardener. Honorine took a deep breath. Radicchio, there's someone in the greenhouse. A hound howled on the other side of the garden wall, and yellow lights blazed to life in big black barn. The stable hands were awake. They would come to investigate the noise, she hoped. Honorin stepped towards the greenhouse door and gripped the tough handle. Pulling it open, she immediately pulled back from the powerful smell. The greenhouse was hot and damp and crowded. The leaded glass windows were fettered with ropey vines and ivy creeping and climbing across nearly every surface. Back in the corner stood a long dead palm tree. It was moldy and withered and infested with some breed of stinging ants, but the palm had been the last gift from Lord Vidalia before he vanished, so Lady Vidalia refused to allow it to be removed. "It's disgusting in here," Honorine muttered, as beetles scattered across the floor. "Why, it is only nature," a voice replied. Honorine froze, her hands pinned to her side as a black-clad figure moved from the shadows and into the wavering yellow-green light of the almond stones hanging across the glass ceiling. A silhouette hand brushed over an enormous white flower blooming from a knotted vine. Nothing beautiful in all the world exists without something a bit vile to balance the ladder, the figure said. Honorine trembled as she stared up at him. He was a tall, slim man with a faded yet still handsome face. His hair was grey and wild, his eyes a brilliant shade of blue. He wore a long dark duster jacket, and his clothes underneath were rather old-fashioned, with a little ruffle on the cuffs of his shirt and a cravat tied neatly under his high collar. On his shoulder sat a ragged black crow, and beside him stood a white wolf, too tall that it stood at eye level with Honorine, its throat shimmering with blue illumination that reminded her of the reflection of sunlight of water. "So this is her?" the man asked. Estrella stepped forward from even farther back in the darkness, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This is her," she said with authority. The man leaned down to bring her face closer to Honorine until he was looking directly into her eyes. "Lovely to meet you, Miss Honorine," she replied. "Honorine," he repeated with a bob of his head. Then he stuck out a hand stained with ink and blood. "They call me the map maker."